Welcome to Supernatural Signals, where the screen meets the spirits. Today we're diving into a story that combines archaeology, paranormal activity, and a possible ancient curse. We're talking about the Hexham Heads, two small stone artifacts that allegedly brought chaos and terror to anyone who possessed them. In 1971, in the small English market town of Hexham, two young boys were digging in their family garden when they unearthed something strange. Two small stone heads, each about the size of an orange. Little did they know, these innocuous-looking objects would soon be blamed for a series of inexplicable and frightening events. So settle in, make sure your doors are locked, and join me as we unravel the mystery of Hexham Heads. Our story begins on a seemingly ordinary day in 1971. Two brothers, Colin and Leslie Robson, aged 11 and 8, were digging in the garden of their family home at 3 Reed Avenue in Hexham. About a foot beneath the surface, they unearthed two small stone heads, each roughly the size of tennis balls. The heads were crudely carved with simplistic facial features. One was made of sandstone with a yellowish tint, while the other was a darker stone, possibly basalt. Both had rough, primitive features, hollowed eyes, rudimentary noses, and basic mouth shapes. Initially, the boys thought they found some interesting toys and brought them inside to show their parents. The Robson family displayed the heads on their mantelpiece, thinking them to be nothing more than a curious garden ornaments. But within days, strange things began to happen in their home. The family reported objects moving on their own. The children's grandmother claimed to see the heads swiveling by themselves on the mantelpiece. But these events were merely a prelude to something far more terrifying. The most infamous event associated with the Hexham Heads occurred shortly after their discovery. The Robsons' next-door neighbor, Ellen Dodd, reported waking up to find a half-man, half-animal creature in her bedroom. Mrs. Dodd described being jolted awake in the middle of the night by what she initially thought was an intruder. But what she saw defied explanation. A tall, hair-covered figure with the body of a man, but the head resembling that of a sheep or a goat. Before she could scream, the creature allegedly turned and walked quietly out of the room, vanishing without a trace. And the most chilling detail? Mrs. Dodd claimed the entity had entered her room through the adjoining wall with Robinson's house, precisely where the stone heads had been found. Police were called, but no evidence of a break-in was discovered. No footprints in the garden, and no forced entry. Whatever Mrs. Dodd had seen that night hadn't entered through any conventional means. The incident terrified both families, but it wasn't the last unexplained event associated with the heads. Word of the strange occurrences spread, eventually reaching Dr. Anne Ross, a respected Celtic scholar from Southampton University who specialized in pagan Celtic stoneheads. Intrigued, Dr. Ross traveled to Hexham to examine the artifacts. After studying the heads, Dr. Ross believed them to be genuine Celtic artifacts, possibly dating back to the 2nd or 3rd century CE. She was interested enough that she asked to borrow them for further research. And the Robson family, by this point thoroughly unsettled by the objects, which is understandable, was more than happy to part with them. Dr. Ross took the heads back to her home in Southampton, and that's when the phenomenon continued to grow. Within days of bringing the heads into her home, Dr. Ross reported experiencing something that shook her scientific worldview to its core. She awoke early one morning to see a werewolf-like figure walking down the hallway outside her bedroom. The following is Dr. Ross's experience in her own words.
It stood about 6 feet high, slightly stooping, and it was black against the white door, and it was half animal and half man. The upper part, I would have to say, was a wolf, and the lower part was human. It was covered with dark, bristly hair.
Dr. Ross, a scientist with an impeccable reputation, claimed the figure turned into her teenage daughter's room. Terrified, she rushed after it, only to find her daughter sleeping peacefully and no sign of the entity. And the following night, Dr. Ross's daughter reported seeing the same figure. Keep in mind, neither of them has discussed the incident beforehand. And the paranormal activity didn't stop there. Dr. Ross reported books flying off the shelves, unexplained noises throughout the house, and a persistent feeling of dread. Eventually, she connected these occurrences to the Hexham Heads and decided to remove them from her home. But the Heads' journey was far from over. They passed through several hands, including those of Dr. Don Robbins, a geologist who had developed theories about the properties of certain stones to record and replay events, almost like supernatural VHS tapes. Every person who temporarily housed the Heads reported the unusual phenomenon, from electrical disturbances to nightmares and physical illnesses. The pattern was becoming clear. The Hexham Heads appeared to bring misfortune to anyone who possessed them. Professor Desmond Craigie, a former arch teacher at Hexham College, came forward claiming he had created the heads as a garden ornaments in the 1950s, burying some in the garden when he moved. Here's what he has to say about the heads.
I made them about 16 years ago. I made the heads from bits of stone and mortar simply to amuse my daughter when she was a little girl. I actually made 3, but one appears to have got lost. They were out in the garden for years. I definitely made them. I have been laughing my head off about these heads, and I cannot understand why all this attention is being paid to them.
But the claims didn't go unchallenged. When asked to replicate his process, the heads he produced were noticeably inferior, even compared to the crude originals. It was a strange failure, casting even more doubt on his story, and leaving the true origins of the Hexham Heads shrouded in mystery. Meanwhile, analysis of the stone composition raised doubts about their supposed Celtic origin. The material appeared too soft for ancient artifacts that had survived nearly 2 millennia underground. The academic community became divided. Some, like Dr. Ross, maintained the head's authenticity and insisted the paranormal events were real. Others dismissed the whole affair as a combination of modern objects and mass hysteria. And this is where our story takes yet another mysterious turn. As debate raged about their origin and supposed powers, the Hexham Heads vanished. After passing through the hands of several researchers, including a Newcastle University professor named Frank Willett, the heads disappeared without a trace. To this day, no one knows their whereabouts. Some claim they were deliberately destroyed to end their curse. Others suggest they were stolen by collectors of the occult. A few even theorize the heads simply moved on of their own, seeking new victims for their supernatural influence. Whatever the truth, the fact remains that the Hexham Heads, objects at the center of one of Britain's most bizarre paranormal cases, have vanished completely from public view. So, what are we to make of the Hexham Heads? Were they genuine Celtic artifacts imbued with ancient power, modern creations that somehow became focal points for paranormal activity, or simply catalysts for mass suggestions and overactive imaginations? The scientific evidence seems to point toward the heads being relatively modern creations. But this doesn't explain the consistent reports of paranormal phenomenon from multiple witnesses, including respected academics like Dr. Ann Ross. Perhaps most telling is that many of those involved, including the Robson family and Dr. Ross, maintained until their dying day that what they experienced was real, not hallucination, not exaggeration, but genuine encounters with something beyond our understanding. The Hexham Heads remain a fascinating case study in how objects can become lightning rods for the unexplained. Whether cursed artifacts or psychological triggers, they've earned their place in the annals of British paranormal history. And perhaps it's best that they've disappeared. Some things, as they say, are better left buried. And to that point, let's close this out with my thoughts on this case, as well as my general thoughts on cursed objects in general. Now, for this specific case, I do believe the objects were haunted or had some kind of bad energy attached to them. I say that because so many individuals had similar experiences, and it's not like they were trying to make money off of it. They generally wanted these things out of their homes as fast as possible. But I still wonder when exactly the heads were created. Part of me thinks that's another layer of the phenomenon, that the material itself might be able to shift or change subtly, depending on who's interacting with it. In that way, everyone's experience could be real, even if the details seem a little different. It's almost like the stones manipulate perception just enough to pull people in and keep the cycle of attention and energy going. So, when it comes to curses in general, I personally believe that a lot of cursed objects are tied to dark, almost demonic entities. They thrive on cycles, on getting attention, being fed by fear and obsession. As an example of how these patterns can work, I talked a bit about this in my last video on the faces of Belmez. During a time when I was experiencing a lot of intense supernatural activity, I found myself constantly seeing faces in random patterns, a phenomenon known as pareidolia, where the mind tries to find familiar images like faces in unrelated textures or objects. After that period, things eventually calmed down for me. But when I finished my video on the faces of Belmez, I actually thought to myself, great, now I'm going to start seeing them again. And sure enough, almost immediately, I began noticing face-like shapes creeping back into my day-to-day surroundings. It almost triggered that old fear again. But something told me not to give them the energy this time, and so I ignored them, and eventually they faded away. I will have the Faces of Belmez video linked down below. I say all this to say, curses and the entities or energies behind them feed on our attention. They pull us into cycles of fear, fascination, and obsession. And the more we acknowledge them, the stronger they seem to grow. Sometimes the best thing you can do when dealing with something you suspect is cursed, haunted, or just plain unsettling is to deny it the power it's sinking from you. Protect your energy, stay grounded, and remember, not every knock, shadow, or face on the wall deserves your fear. All right, that's all for today's episode. If you enjoyed diving into the supernatural with me, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences. I always love hearing from you. Until next time, stay curious, stay tuned into the supernatural. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.